It's the Reid Method Insider Podcast. We're going to dive right into this one. It's episode 74. We're at 74 episodes already. We've been doing one or two a week. We've been averaging like 1.5 new shows each week. And we've had some very interesting guests, including our returning guest tonight, who is the founder and CEO of Badger Maps, the #1 route planner for field salespeople. And just to refresh, Steven had his MBA from Stanford. He joined Google, where he became Google's #1 enterprise sales executive globally in 2009. So this guy knows his stuff about sales and outside sales and worldwide sales for that matter. And in 2012, Steve founded Badger Maps to help field sales reps be more successful in their multi-stop route planning system. He also hosts Outside Sales Talk, a podcast that I've guested on, which is really cool, where he interviews industry experts on to share their top sales tips. And he also, as a result of that podcast, he started the Sales Hall of Fame, which he's a president of the Sales Hall of Fame. This is the only Sales Hall of Fame I know of. And today we're going to talk about how to transition from outside sales, or skills outside sales rep need to transition to inside sales role. So welcome back, Steven, to our series of training here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really happy to be back, and hopefully we can cover some useful stuff here.
Yeah, and we've covered a lot of ground in these three in this series of podcast shows that you and I have done, and all with relevant major subjects, as I alluded to before with the previous two episodes. And today, this show is as a result of one of our followers. Actually, was one of your followers when you posted one of our last episodes, asking the question directly, what should outside salespeople do in order to transition to inside sales, where they can't be on the road as much, if at all? And what do they do? And in doing the research for this show tonight, it's a very deep subject, and it's not as easy as people might think. Just get off the road and go sit around a desk to start selling, selling stuff. So, So there's much transition going on right now, as we know, as we touched on a little bit before the show started, in all areas, in all retail spaces. And there's a significant rise in inside sales while the outside sales forces are shrinking. So what do you think that looks like? So one of the researches that I did, Stephen, and you may already know this or find this interesting, where in 2016, Salesforce had actually done a survey where 40% of large tech companies had planned to increase their inside sales headcount, and then startups and smaller tech companies were already generating most of 55% of their sales or revenues from inside sales teams. And that was in 2016, right? So what do you think that looks like, let's say, in 2019, just before COVID hit? And now the follow-up question would be what it looks like after.
Yes, I guess there's the key piece of that survey, I think, is that it's of tech companies. So there's been a big change in the way tech companies have gone to market since I started my career. Technology used to be very expensive and sold on CDs. And I'm speaking specifically of software. Hardware, like servers, used to be sold, direct from the major old traditional server manufacturers, HP, IBM, et cetera. And they, when VMware kind of, came online and started recreating, using virtualization, and this is getting into the weeds technology, the history of it, but they basically, a lot of servers got commoditized. So that kind of technology changed a lot and is effectively sold through online or inside sales channels right now. And frankly, most things are moving to the cloud. That's the big trend. So people aren't even buying servers anymore. Like Badger Maps, our software company, we obviously serve software all over the world to field salespeople. We have 0 servers. We don't have one server.
Wow.
It's all cloud based. We use several cloud providers to do different things. But that's really the running of the physical boxes, the physical servers, is no longer a responsibility of most technology companies. So I guess so that's half of technology, like the actual hardware. The other half is the software, and software used to be sold, for a lot of money by a field sales rep who would show up at your office and sell you the software, and they were giving you a very expensive CD, right? The tech work was all done up front. The investment was done up front. It's a finished product. They're handing you a CD, right? Yeah. And you buy it once, and then you own the software on that CD. If you want to pay the software company on an ongoing basis, they'll give you updates to that software. And that was generally between 15 and 20% of the original cost of the software. So if you paid $1 million for a piece of software, it was another $200,000 a year if you wanted to get rights to the updates to that software, the next CD effectively, which would come out every 3 years or whatever. The reason you've seen this major move from inside sales from outside sales to inside sales is because that trend has changed in technology. So technology now software is generally sold as a service. It's like electricity that comes out of the wall. They call it cloud computing. And what that means is you can consume it on an as needed basis. If you have like for Badger, we sell software for field salespeople. If you have a team of field salespeople for 100 people, you buy exactly 100 licenses and you pay for those on a monthly or annual basis. And it's about $50 a person per month. And that's pretty common for how software is sold. But you'll note $50 a month is a lot cheaper than $1 million one time. And so as a result, when things are cheaper, less friction, less questions, it's less of a challenging decision to make. You move to servicing customers in an inside model because it's cheaper, right? It doesn't make sense to fly people around the world to sell someone, $500 a month worth of software. Whereas it would have if you were selling them $1 million of software or $500,000 in software. So we've seen this major trend and change in the software industry. And I think it's important to, it's an important case study, basically, because a lot of companies are in a short-term way being effectively forced by COVID to sell with an inside sales strategy instead of what they have traditionally done and was traditionally the best way for them to go to market, which was an outside sales strategy. And so you can kind of look at the software industry and how sales has changed in the software industry over the last, especially the last 10, 15 years. I mean, even 10 years ago, cloud computing was in its early stages. I mean, but it's really pretty much it is the dominant way it's done today. So you can look at this as a case study and learn from it.
Yeah. So we covered pretty much tech company and you're a software tech company yourself. What about the, nuts and bolts, so to speak, outside salespeople who, whether it be, goods, food, I know a couple of account managers that sold food to restaurants and, like in your previous example, beer to bars and stuff like that. Like the nuts and bolts people out there, how do you think they're managing right now? How does this same analogy apply to them?
Well, I think it depends on your industry, and it's very different if you're selling food to bars or medical devices to doctors, or beer to bars. Let's do beer to bars versus medical devices to doctors, and these these are the types of customers that Badger has, and so I know them really well, and this has affected these businesses in very, very different ways. If you sell, and we've lost about 20% of our customers. I mean, and hopefully they're coming back and they're furloughed now, but bars will open. If in the case of the beer to bars person, that sales rep is furloughed today, but hopefully bars will open up here at some point again, and we'll all leave our houses and be able to do that safely again, and therefore people will drink beer at bars again, and therefore you'll need a sales rep selling beer to that bar again, and they'll come off of their furlough. But it's very different if you're selling beer to bars right now versus medical devices to doctors. If you're selling medical devices to doctors, you're still operating in a very similar way. So we saw about 20%, a 20% reduction in our customer base as a result of COVID, just from these traditional nuts and bolts, as you say, salespeople that are out selling. It's a really, really challenging time for a lot of companies, and depending on who they are, some of them just can't go into the field at all, or can't go meet with their customers at all. And so it can be really challenging for a sales team to bridge this gap of going from a sales model of having face-to-face visits where you're sitting down and getting to explain things to your customer, pitch to your customer. And maybe it's a complex sale, maybe it's an expensive sale, maybe it's a risky sale, maybe it's a competitive sale. All those things kind of lead you down the path of outside sales and face-to-face interactions being the best way to go to market. And in a lot of cases, companies just aren't able to do that anymore. So they're switching over to an inside sales methodology in a lot of cases, or just shutting down in the cases of beer to bars, right? They just shut down production, shut down the sales team, et cetera. But in some cases, they are needing to make this shift. So maybe you sold cancer ablating equipment to radiation oncologists, and the radiation oncologists really can't meet you face to face right now, but they still need to buy radiation oncology equipment, and so they still want to meet with you, but they just want to meet not face to face, but they want to meet they want to meet over Zoom.
Over Zoom, yeah.
So in a lot of these cases, it's very difficult for these types of reps sometimes, because there's a reason that their stuff was being sold face to face in the beginning, and now that the product can't be demoed well or shown, the doctor can't see it, you can't build the relationship, et cetera. It's extending and expanding sales cycles. It's making things take longer. So I think. Not to mention, and why is it taking longer? That relationships are impacted. It's harder to build relationships. It's harder to look around the room and see what people's body language is, who's supportive of a deal, who's not. I guess to your point, so what should these people do who are in these nuts and bolts sales situations, that you refer to, in terms of they were going to the field, now they're not. I think the key is to stay productive for these types of reps, keep generating new sales cycles, and more sales cycles, moving sales cycles downfield. Even if you can't demo your product in person, for example, just keep doing what you can, and a sales cycle extension doesn't mean it's not going to come. It just means it's going to come later. So you need to focus on building out the funnel, at the top of the funnel as much as you can. The middle of the funnel maybe kind of feel like a no man's land, but just keep pushing and moving things downfield. And sometimes the end of the sales cycle can be very challenging right now for field sales reps, because they're not able to, maybe the purse strings are closed or are tighter. Maybe they don't have the same access to the decision makers as they used to have. My little light here is going out there. That's better. It was kind of flickering on me. So I think another thought for these reps is learn how inside sales reps have been behaving as opposed to outside sales reps. So they use different strategies to build relationships than outside sales reps necessarily do, right? So maybe an outside sales rep would show up with donuts and coffee, and that was a great strategy. Or maybe they would take people out to lunch or dinner or whatever it is. There were a lot of things that outside sales people had at their disposal. And so what's helpful is to look to inside sales reps and see what they've done and what different strategies they take to be more successful. Good example of that, I think one thing you see inside salespeople doing a lot better than outside salespeople is developing their social selling skills. So learning about your customers online before a meeting, researching them, building your relationship in a social environment. And obviously this is a topic big enough for a book. And it's not my area of expertise by any means. I on my podcast, I have invited like four or five social selling experts on during COVID. And so there's like, they all kind of approach social selling in a different way. And there's a ton of like tips and tricks that you can learn to better build relationships, better maintain relationships. It's kind of like almost like a drip email that's more passive, because they're just, if you're creating great content, they keep following you. And if you're putting stuff out there in a meaningful way, in a thoughtful way, people continue to interact with your brand. And there's a bunch of things that you can do, but I do recommend checking out some, reading a book on social selling. There are some great experts on it. If you just look up LinkedIn and social selling on my podcast, like the titles, you can tell which titles are about that I've come out with in the last 3 months. There's like 4 or 5 of them, and those guys are great. So you can read their books or just listen to their episode. But there's definitely a lot of wisdom there on how you can set up a profile, how you can, what cadences and sequences that you can use, little tricks and tips. That's a thing that I think an outside sales rep making that inside transition should look at. I'm trying to think what are some of the good tips. I think another tip for outside salespeople right now in general, and all salespeople, I guess, sales cycles are extended. This is a difficult time. Focus. One way to stay motivated and keep your focus on how am I going to perform in the next year? How much money am I going to make in the next year? As opposed to being like, what am I going to do this month? Because like maybe August is just going to be tough. And a lot of people are in industries where this is not your fault, and it's going to be a slow time. Right. But what you can do to be productive is try to be able to look back at this period and be like, well, yeah, I didn't really lose that much because I just didn't get as many sales in August, but I set them up to be closed, next February, and I really knocked them down in February. And so it just, depending on your industry, you can focus on, doing well in February once, next February, once things open up, for example, then even if you're not going to close the sales now, there are things that you can do to really kill it next year, and with lead gen and building relationships and that sort of thing.
So what do you think has driven the move towards inside sales, and why this is such a big opportunity for big companies and small companies? And, what about those guys that are saying, wait a minute, I'm used to going out and meeting customers, and a lot of these deals, regardless of COVID or not, or regardless of the circumstance, these are big deals, and face to face, this is how you close deals. Do they need to adapt to some sort of a hybrid model? In the office 3 days, meet 1 day, one appointment, virtual meetings, some in between. What about, those guys who get off, they're always on the road, and you say, now you got to stick them around a desk, and they're just not comfortable communicating that way.
Yeah. Well, I think, the first part of that question was what has driven this change? And we started out talking about kind of the technology industry. And I think that has been an ongoing movement, and that was driven by the economics of field sales. Field sales are more expensive because you're sending a more expensive rep. So outside salespeople tend to be more expensive than inside salespeople because it's a broader skill set. You need to have more skills in general to have developed more skills to be in outside sales than inside sales.
And you got car expenses and flights and expense accounts and lunches.
Yeah, exactly. Not just in salary, but also in the actual expense of moving them around. Right.
Exactly.
So it's outside sales is just more expensive than inside sales. Why would you do it? Well, because in many cases it's far more effective, and therefore, it's made up for in greater sales, shorter sales cycles, better relationships, better customer retention, et cetera. But the model, I think that you see a lot with field salespeople, and why have you seen this move in other areas is obviously just COVID, right? There's a lot of people that can't go and see their customers right now, right? And that's a real problem in general, I think. So that's why you're seeing this today, and you didn't see it before necessarily, right? So let's see. The next part of your question was.
Is it a mix? Like, are they going to be in the office 2-3 days a week? Going to be on the road a couple of times a week, or is there a happy medium?
Yeah, I think this also the hybrid model you asked about. I think most field salespeople are in some way in a hybrid model and always have been. I mean, they're still, just because you were a salesperson that effectively was in the field a lot, you were still doing some phone calls or some emails or some mailers, or there was office work to be done, regardless, right? So I think that everyone was always in a hybrid model. Even if you were like a pure door-to-door sales rep, like knocking on doors and selling water to offices or insurance to offices, or solar panels to homes or security to homes, like pure play B2B or B2C field sales. I think even in those cases, you were already in somewhat of a hybrid role, right? You still were following up with people with phone calls, et cetera. But I think the modern world allows us to kind of have the best of both worlds. If you're a field salesperson, but you have a meeting that can be done with Zoom or can be done over the phone, can be done over, if you can keep in touch with people with text messages and social selling, you can leverage all these things to get greater reach and do even better. But it doesn't necessarily replace what you're doing in the field. But maybe you are spending 1 day a week in the office catching up on all that stuff, and then 4 days a week in the field. And I think we see that a lot.
So do guys need to panic? Like, if you're on the road all the time and you're making this move now, you've been forced to make this move because of COVID and all the other stresses of that the circumstance of COVID brings. Should they panic, that they're having to get off the road, or the stresses of having to deal with it, and how do they view the move to inside sales as an opportunity?
Well, I think for one thing, in industries where the best way to go to market is face-to-face and field sales, that will be back, and they just have to kind of grind through this time, and it's just going to be a tough time. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't panic. There are cases where the industry the way you were making your living 6 months ago maybe is going to be a bad way to make a living for the next for 12 more months, maybe. Who knows? I don't know when restaurants will be fully open. If you're a bartender right now, you've got to find a new career for a short period of time, right? And there are certain types of field salespeople or inside salespeople that need to do the same, or retail salespeople for certain. Obviously, like there's a ton of retail salespeople out there that are all out of work right now. Yeah. So I think, it is a good time to make a shift. I mean, if someone was selling purses in a Chanel store and now that Chanel store is closed, I think that, you could maybe take some of those skills and those sales skills, they're going to transition to an inside sales role where you're selling, something else over the phone. And that maybe isn't the best role for you, and it maybe isn't your ideal role, but it's something that you can do for the next year until the retail stores open up again. And then you can switch back to that if that was your expertise and what was the best fit for you. But I do think people need to be willing to make changes and willing to try new things to make ends meet in these times. But I mean, panic is never good unless you need to panic before you're going to take action. Panic is never good. But in general, I do see this as being a temporary thing. I think, we have a couple things going on right now. One, we have a recession, which we, maybe have not seen the worst of yet. It's the end of August 2020. So things, the stock market's still very high. There are there are indicators that things are going to be fine. There's also, I think, some risk of a decent downturn and a prolonged recession here. So dealing with that is one thing, dealing with COVID and that whole situation is another. And I think, some people need to take actions and make changes in the way they're making their living, what they're doing, what their burn rate is in terms of expenses. And there are people that, but I think all those changes should be made with keeping into account, hey, that Chanel store is going to be open again. People are going to buy purses again. That, the travel industry, people are going to travel again. They're dying to do it. They just, they can't do it right now. People would love to go to bars and drink beer. If you're a beer salesman, you will be selling beer to bars again, but look to do something else right now that, to make ends meet. And, but certainly those roles will come back, and face-to-face sales, field sales, outside sales, it's crucial for many types of sales. It shortens sales cycles. It deepens relationships. It'll always be important. It's really hard to replicate the connection that you can make with a customer in person, whether you're on Zoom or over the phone. Interactions over the internet and over the, they're clunky, they're awkward. In-person meetings with eye contact, and you can understand a customer and their problems better.
Yeah, there's more authenticity to it. You know if there's a connection. You can feel
absolutely.
It.
Yeah.
Right.
You can feel the connection. It's how we're evolved. It's what we do. I think we can. I kind of like to say that both dating apps and sales may be enhanced by so dating and sales are both enhanced by the internet, but neither will replace in-person interactions, whether dates or sales cycles. They're going to stay in person ultimately to some degree, but
sooner or later you got to step out and meet.
You got to get out into the sun, right? So I think
they've been saying this for car sales ever since I was I won't even date myself, but it's been a long time. They've been saying, oh yeah, car sales is going to go fully online. Nobody's going to come in the showroom anymore. And oh my goodness, a typical Saturday afternoon in the showroom is still a zoo.
Yeah, I think that's incorrect. I mean, there are certain companies that are able to do it because the demand for their cars is greater than their product, or than the number of cars they're able to sell. So there's less inventory than there is demand for the inventory. And Tesla's the only thing I can really think of that is like that. But for the bulk of the market, it's hard to imagine someone wanting to make a purchase of a BMW or a Lexus without visiting the Lexus dealership, visiting the BMW dealership, visiting the Mercedes dealership, talking to the salespeople, touching the car, sitting in the car, making sure it fits them. I mean, if you're going to have people getting an opportunity to interact with the car, it's worth having a salesperson there. It's foolish for a CFO to look at that as purely a cost, because if you're selling a product that has margins, you're going to win more business if you have that salesperson interacting with the person, answering their questions, predicting their objections, overcoming their objections, positioning against the competition. You're going to make more sales and ultimately more profit if you have that salesperson than if you try to save money on that line item. And that's basically what going all internet would be. And if let's just say that BMW decided to do that. They're like, wow, look how much money these guys over at Tesla are saving by not having a sales team. That's fantastic. I'm the CFO of BMW. I'm just gonna get rid of all these showrooms and all these salespeople, and you can just buy BMWs online. Who would like to do that? Well, Mercedes and Lexus are going to eat BMW's lunch if they do that, because the Lexus sales guy is going to be able to talk up. Is going to have that opportunity to talk up the Lexus that the BMW as a company didn't get to have, and so they'll beat them, and so I think that field sales and face-to-face sales and salespeople are here to stay. I actually think it's one of the better long-term careers in our economy, because a lot of careers are going to have problems over the next 20 years because of globalization, because of automation, because software is eating the world. There are a lot of jobs that are great jobs today that are effectively more and more being done by software or by someone. Maybe it was a high paying job in Ohio, and now it's a low paying job in wherever, Pakistan. But those trends are important and here to stay, right? So globalization and software. There's a lot of jobs that were done by hand, by grunt work, and now we've just coded software to be smart enough to do it, or one person can do the job of 10, right? Like the world used to need way more accountants than the world needs today because software is doing a lot of the accounting work automatically. So there's an example of a high paying job that is both subject to both outsourcing, because someone in Pakistan can be a great accountant for a firm that is based in Ohio, and so that firm in Ohio doesn't need to hire a local accountant. And also software helps a lot. There's really big companies that have built great software products that do the bulk of your taxes and your accounting. So I think that sales, however, is not like that. Sales, you need someone who has cultural understanding and connect with your customers. You need someone, in a lot of cases, it needs to be face-to-face, or if it's not, you won't win deals, or it's worth it. It's worth paying for it to be face-to-face, et cetera.
And what I'm hearing you echo there, without using the one word, is people welcome and appreciate the experience and of dealing with a real person.
Absolutely.
The experience matters, because oftentimes that's what they're shopping for, is the experience. It's not, the products they can get from one showroom to the next. But the experience is what sells products these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Starbucks proved that. I can make just as good a cup of coffee as Starbucks can in my kitchen, and I don't have to leave my house. But why do I go to Starbucks? And it costs a quarter. And why would I ever go to Starbucks and pay $5 for a cup of coffee? That's I got to travel there. It costs 20 times more than what I could have done it for. And it's the same thing. It's like
people do it every day.
It's hot water that keeps me awake. I do it because I enjoy the experience, right? Like, I'm driving by one. I know I'm going home. I could make a cup when I got home, but I want I want them to make it. I want to stop there. I like the way they make it. I like
write your name on the cup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, why do we like it? I don't know, because they've created a great experience. Yeah. But if I'm going to buy a Lexus, I want to buy it from you, right? Because you know everything about it, and I don't even know what questions to ask. I don't what. If I'm in a car buying cycle, and you know how to tell me what I need to hear and guide me, and you're a Sherpa of my experience.
I made this point today on an earlier show that we did out west again. Actually, it was out of British Columbia, and I said to them, outside sales reps and sales reps in general, anyone interacting with clients are creating solutions and solving problems for clients even before those problems occur. And that's where the opportunities are, is anticipating, okay, your lease is coming up, or you're going to start paying for maintenance after, 40,000 miles or kilometers, whichever country you're in. And it's to anticipate and reach out to that client and say, here's a solution. I'll upgrade you to a new car. And keep your payments very close. You won't have to pay maintenance again for another 2-3 years. You'll have the latest technology and all the connectivity, and it won't cost you much extra, or it will only do this, and all you have to do is this. So literally, it's not the car or the product so much, but it's the fact that you're making it so seamless that they're saying, well, sure, if it's that easy, and you mean all I have to do is come in once, or they know that what they like. They already know the product. So if you're offering them a newer one, it must be better. It most likely is better. So it's there's a lot of that's missing, and why outside sales or face-to-face sales is such a huge opportunity for good salespeople to become great, average salespeople to become good, or for anyone seeking a career change, which is ultimately what's happening now. Like you spoke about those Chanel sales reps who were probably in a retail store, selling purses and bags and whatnot. This may be an opportunity for them to visit a car dealership and look for to make a career change. Because I'm telling you, they'll be probably very good at it.
Sure. If you can sell purses, you can sell cars. I mean, it's, the skill sets for different types of sales are highly transferable.
Yeah.
Communication.
And some purses cost as much as a used car these days.
Absolutely. Which doesn't make any sense to me, but why? No one asked me what I think.
I have no idea.
but I think what one thing you mentioned that made me think it's trust, right? Like with Lexus having you as a salesperson, your customers trust you. They've been coming to you for years. You led them right the last time. They've been happy. You understand them. You've got notes about what's important to them. You know that Mrs. Jones really just loves the smooth ride of the Lexus. And, you know that Mr. Jones has always kind of asked for a zippier car. So it's so nice the way the hybrid model you can flip from kind of eco mode over to sport mode. They both just love those cars because they're getting the best of both worlds, and you can tell them about that on day one when they come in because you sold them their last one. You understand what's important to them. You have that relationship. You have their trust because you led them right last time. That's hard for Tesla to compete with because they're just checking out the specs online right now, right? So I think there are times when companies get away without doing great at sales, but competition will come in.
It will catch up. Yeah.
Yeah. There have been, that's happened a bunch of times over the years in software, as some company will have such a hot product and everybody just knows what it is already and wants it. And so they're like, oh, we don't even have a sales team. People just, show up and send us checks, right? Like, those companies, as they mature, as they get competitors, they always end up having sales teams.
We'll deliver it to your home and put it in your driveway, and we'll throw you the keys from the curb because of COVID. So right. No one will show you the car either. Yeah. And show you how it works. So, yeah, there's a lot of opportunities out there. So, and I'm glad we touched on this subject, and there's so many different analogies and comparisons. But so what about the culture? When you're leaving the outside sales role that you've been in for 20 years, and now because of a pandemic, you can't sell beer bars, like you say, and you're going into an inside sales role, or you're leaving the Chanel store and you're walking into a car dealership, will this be a culture shock for these people?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think the way the world is right now is a culture shock for a lot of people. I mean, I think social people in general are lonely right now. I think, people feel disconnected from family and friends, and, I think, but also their roles, right? If you've changed from being a field salesperson to an inside salesperson, and field salespeople enjoy a lot of autonomy in their lives and in their days, and they're moving around out in the world. It's very different whether you're in a world where you're going to an office now every day, versus if you're going in a world where you're just staying at home and working from home, which I think is probably more common with a lot of people that were in field sales and are now being switched to inside sales. By the time we can go to offices, they can also go back out into the field. So I suspect that the common change we're seeing right now is people that were in field sales that are now just like working out of their spare bedroom. But yeah, I think being in an office every day, there are cultural issues that salespeople, someone who has been in outside sales for 20 years might struggle with, just the politics and it's less I find going to an office every day less like mentally stimulating than when I was in field sales. Because I go to an office basically every day now because I run this company. I guess I'm still traveling around, so I'll meet with customers. I go to our different offices. Well, all our offices are closed right now, so I'm not doing that. But I did go to all of our offices. But in Europe we have an office, Philippines, Utah, and San Francisco. So I was moving around quite a bit. Just running the company. But when I was in field sales, I was always flying to new places or driving to new places and interacting with new people. And I really enjoyed that element, the freedom, the autonomy, just the excitement, the stimulus of it all was I really enjoyed. And I think field salespeople, a lot of them do enjoy that and will miss that when they, certainly when they're stuck in their spare bedroom, but even if they were going to an office job every day where they're sitting at the same desk and, just seeing the same people every day and kind of much more structure and 9-to-5 feel to an office than a field salesperson.
Yeah. And there are those who just love working alone, right? Mm-hmm. In their car is their office, and they come into the office once a week or once a month. And it's a hard shift. It's a hard shift to be literally forced to make the transition because there's no clients for you to visit. So just getting out of the working by yourself environment to being forced into working at home or in an office, or strictly over the phone, along with dealing with the code. I mean, it's two issues you're dealing with. And those who also have to, look after kids or family members, that's a third issue. So there's a lot of stress involved with it too. So that's why I was touching on, would this be a culture shock, and how would most salespeople who are used to being on the road, literally have to stop dead in their tracks and work from home? So with that said, Steve, what are 3 tips that you would offer to outside sales reps that are transitioning to this inside role? Just to sum up everything that we just talked about on this episode about how skilled outside sales reps can transition to inside sales roles.
Well, I guess first tip is don't be afraid to make transitions right now. They're likely temporary, but don't be frozen by what's going on. Make transitions, keep making ends meet. I guess second is there are sales skills, relationship building skills that are very different in the modern world than I guess it's very different to go through a whole sales cycle over Zoom and the phone than it is when you could show up in person, you could interact with people. It's very different to give a presentation or a demonstration to a prospect in a remote situation. I think many salespeople, they usually meet with their customers in person, and to make the transition to remote selling, it can be a real challenge. There are many products that it's way better to sell in person, obviously, right? And you're disadvantaged in Zoom over the phone. But I think a car being a great example. You take away the showroom and the sales guy, it's tough, right? But if when you are presenting over in a remote environment, I think there's some things to keep in mind that will make this first recognize that it is different and that there are some things you have to do differently. So in person, you don't have to be as succinct. You can have like natural conversations. I think presenting over video or over the phone, you have to be a lot more succinct, a lot briefer. People's attention spans are different in person than they are like watching a Zoom or something. So if you've been talking for 10 minutes, that's bad. And you can assume no one's paying attention anymore because, it's just, we all have Zoom fatigue to some degree. It's a real thing. I think you can bring in like interactive activities, try to keep the audience engaged, especially if it's a group of people you're presenting to. You can, poll people, give them quizzes, ask them questions, give them the ability to offer their opinions or questions via chat. I guess this kind of depends on the size. you can still leverage slides. It's probably important to keep it simple. I think graphics, animation features are great. There's you don't want too many of them, I guess. Sometimes less can be more, but you need to engage people, and it's much easier to be engaging when you're in the room with them, right? I think a lot of field salespeople historically have been able to leverage their interpersonal skills, and then once they're it's harder to be funny over Zoom. It's harder to be engaging over Zoom than it is in person, right? So if it's harder to just make a connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's harder for them to understand your message. I think there's some quote: people will not work to understand your message. You have to work to be understood. It's great, classic sales quote. Think about transitions.
Yeah.
It's much more difficult to transition from one thing. People have a difficult time following points in a way that they are able to follow points face to face. When you start presenting over Zoom or if you're talking on the phone, it can be hard to follow where someone is. You want to, you want to make sure that you summarize what you're talking about. Keep circling back to, hey, this is the question I'm answering. Even like in this call, right? Like you'll hear me be like, okay, so yeah, like by the way, that's another, like I could summarize this section by being like, that's another reason, another tip for people making this transition from outside to inside sales. Like all these things that I've been saying are tips for making this transition. So
I found something that you just said there, because I actually had it in one of my sales courses.
Mm-hmm.
So it was Susan Cain, the book Quiet Power. People don't buy because they understand what's being sold. They buy because they feel understood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important. Yeah. And it's harder to understand them. I think one important thing which she's saying there is you've got to understand your customers' problems before you can sell to them. And it's so much harder to connect to them and understand them and empathize with them and get where they're coming from over the phone than it is, or over Zoom than it is in person. So yeah,
that's a very important point, and it takes a bit more effort. We know that it takes a bit more effort, and sometimes I feel what's important and relevant today is to keep in touch in between these official Zoom calls or in between these official presentations, whether that's a Monday morning checkup or checking in, or Friday, to say have a good weekend, let me know if you need anything for the rest of the week or over the weekend, or whatever the case may be. Or whether it's one of those empathy calls, just making sure, just checking in how they're handling this situation. If there's anything that you could do to offer some additional service that will help their team out or help their customers. And so that when you get on these Zoom calls, and like you say, when things get back to some sort of normalcy, they'll remember those conversations. They'll remember who checked in with them. I've had several clients like this, and who I've been sold multiple cars to over the last 8 years, and calling their homes and saying, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? Especially my some older clients that I have, they're not necessarily shocked, but they're still pleasantly surprised. Just to call and say, hey, are you okay? How are you handling things? I haven't seen you in a while.
Well, and one more thing you can, as an outside salesperson, changing to an inside sales role along what you're saying right here, along the same path is, and I guess we talked about it a few minutes ago, is focus on your social selling.
Yeah.
Focus on how can you're connected to all these people. Make sure you're connected to all your prospects first of all, but then you can create a valuable piece of content, or a company can create a valuable piece of content for all of their sales reps to send out to. That's really engaging and great to put. Like if I were Lexus, I would be handing you a great infographic to share on LinkedIn, because you're connected with all these people who are potential buyers of and your Facebook for that matter. Some of these people are your friends. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, they should be giving you great content that you couldn't create, like, the most fantastic infographic. Someone who went to college for design and communication and marketing is the person who should do that. They should create some amazing, really engaging graphic, like about Lexuses and why they're great and why now is a great time to buy one. And you can share it, and all the other sales reps at Lexus can share it with their networks. That's a valuable thing for Lexus to invest in, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we all have thousands of followers. I mean, collectively as sales reps in any given dealership, it's probably amounting to tens of thousands of combined friends and followers. So it's a great way to get the message out literally in 30 seconds to a whole bunch of people. And it's pretty much free to do so. And the other thing, while you brought that up, is these individuals, if you're doing this type of social selling or social branding, is you, the individual, are becoming the brand as opposed to the logo on the building, so to speak, because you're the person they're contacting. And one of the great things that I know this social selling and keeping in touch does is the majority of clients that I have, if they come in for service, they literally will pay a visit to me or ask if I'm in. Some will hide jokingly because they don't want to be upgraded to a new car, but that's usually the chance they take of coming in the showroom. But in a fun way. But they come to develop this expectation of dealing with the person, seeing them, having the go-to person, dealing with a familiar face, familiar relationships, conversations, knowing that, okay, this person is there. So if I have a problem, the first person I'm calling is my guy or my gal who I deal with, because I have that assurance, So I think that's very important today. I mean, it always has been. Relationships always have been important. But going forward, I think it's become even more relevant for companies overall to sustain whatever type of business they can and to potentially grow in the future. Because when things get back to whatever kind of normal we'll have, those relationships are going to have opportunities to thrive, and those businesses will have opportunities to thrive.
Yeah, so important to stay in touch with people at that level. I think. I mean, it's and you can really there's a lot to learn about social media, and how to do account-based sales and leverage social media when you do it. There's a guy named Jamie Shanks that I did a podcast with that talked about this, that was really valuable on my podcast, Outside Sales Talk. The Jamie Shanks episode, really, that he talked a lot about this and how you can leverage it.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely check that out. Because that's so important going forward, and anyone should check that out. Whether you're inside sales or outside sales, check out Outside Sales Talk first of all, which is Steve Benson's podcast, and you've got some really great guests, and they should go to your YouTube channel too and check out your videos, because they're outstanding, and as well they're featured on LinkedIn, and your training is there.
Yeah, those little training videos are worth watching. They're like 10 minutes each, and I've probably done 10 of them on topics I think are pretty important. They're just on the Badger Maps YouTube page under sales training classes. They're cool. Those I spent a lot of time on those, but they were a lot of fun. But it was kind of just a hobby for me, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, being in front of the camera that long, oh my God, it takes patience, man.
It's amazing how much effort goes into making a 10-minute video. It's a lot of effort.
Yeah, trust me, it is. Well, folks, here's another episode. This was the third in a series of episodes with Steve Benson. And I certainly encourage you to go back and check out episode 68 on the Reid Method Insider. It's actually, this is going to make your fourth episode with me. We did our first episode like a couple of years ago, and a couple of years went by, and all of a sudden we were doing like 3 in pretty much a month.
Yeah, well, right? we've got the time now, Everold.
We got the time. We got the time. So
I don't know about you, but I'm not busy right now.
Well, I'm trying to be busy, but it's not working very well in a good way. So, folks, we've check out episode 68 where Steven and I discuss how to lead a sales team in a time of economic crisis, because every company out there, with the exception of even if your company is thriving and is experiencing exponential growth in sales, you need to know how to lead that sales team so it doesn't fall apart. And the second episode, 69, was action sales leaders need to take in a recession or to avoid one within your company. And we know that that's some companies have had some issues already. And then this episode today was on talking about the skills outside sales reps need to transition to inside sales roles. And there are a ton of nuggets and valuable pieces of information here that Steven shared with us tonight that I encourage you to go to the YouTube channel when this is all edited, or go to the podcast. It's the Reid Method Insider Podcast. You can subscribe and download wherever you consume your podcasts. Spotify, we're there on Spotify now, iTunes, SoundCloud, everywhere. And don't forget, while you're there, leave us a review. It really helps us so that we can continue to bring you great guests like Steve Benson tonight. We've had the privilege of having Steve on 4 times, Les Brown a few times. My mentor, one of my mentors, Tom Hopkins, who's now retired, he's been on 5 times. And Evan Carmichael recently. This guy's got like 2.5 million YouTube followers or something, and counting by. Yeah, so he's doing really, really well. And go subscribe, please, to my YouTube channel. There's the Everold Reid YouTube channel. Check out all these podcasts are edited and formatted on YouTube for your consumption. So you can watch these episodes as well, or listen to them on your podcast app. And any last words, Steve, before we head out?
No, it's I really appreciate you bringing me back on the show here. If anybody needs anything from me, you can reach me on LinkedIn. Just look up Steve Benson, Badger Maps. Always happy to be a resource for people.
Yes, and you are indeed a great resource. So I encourage all you listeners and followers off the Reid Method Insider and the Reid Method series. Steve Benson is a real resource. I mean, his wealth of in-depth knowledge and perspective on sales, inside sales, outside sales, obviously entrepreneurship. The man founded Badger Maps, for crying out loud. He was Google's #1 enterprise global sales rep in the world in 2009. So, a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience. Check out his YouTube channels. They're worth watching, because you get what I appreciate about what Steven brings to the table is, there's a lot of sales talk out there, and it's really regurgitating a lot of the same stuff. This isn't what you're used to hearing at any type of sales conversation. It's more in depth, thought provoking, real, innovative in a way. So there's a lot there, and I appreciate Steve's perspective. So Steve, thank you very much again.
Thanks for having me, Everold. Appreciate it.
And we will we'll definitely probably have to continue. If we get any more requests, on another subject, we'll have to keep going with the series.
I love it. I'm running out of things to say. I mean, I think you've heard me say almost everything I know about. I mean,
well, the challenge is on. We'll see. Well, folks, always remember, especially for 2020 here, please be thoughtful. Please be thoughtful with everyone and everything that you do. Be intentional, and be intentional about, looking after your clients. Be intentional about keeping in touch with your clients. Be intentional about being focused. Steve talked a lot about being focused tonight, and be intentional about being safe. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a fantastic day, night, whatever time, wherever you are.